Hey, everybody, it's Tommy Canale. Do me a favor and head over to our website, beforethelightspod.com. Over there, you can see all our episodes, show notes, contact information, how you can reach out to us, and become members of our Patreon group to become part of the Extra Five. Head over to Instagram and follow us at Before the Lights Pod. And if you have a couple minutes, go to Apple Podcast, rate and review the show, please. 5 stars, nice comments are always welcome. And speaking of welcome to the show, Before the Lights, the show to find out how those in sports, music, and entertainment made their mark. Let's get this one started. Go grab yourself a coffee or grab a drink, and in these days, maybe you have both. I don't know. Tell your family, friends, neighbors, and strangers it's time to have an in-depth conversation with our guest. On today's show, we are joined by the CEO and founder of PRP, a sport management and corporate consulting organization. He is a film producer, the executive producer of Uncle Drew, along with Shaq Life. He's a brand builder, the CEO and agency rep for Shaquille O'Neal and NBA star Jason Tatum. Along with being a business executive, please welcome to the show, Perry Rogers. Perry, thank you so much for joining us today. It's good to connect.
Thanks, Tommy. Thanks for having me.
We're going to kind of, go A to Z, nuts to bolts, so to speak. And a lot of people talk about this. First thing I want to talk about is born and raised in Las Vegas. A lot of people anymore here are from different areas, including myself. So to find somebody who's been born and raised is rare, and attended Bishop Gorman High School, which I assume was over on Maryland Parkway at the time, as I recall. So talk about growing up in Las Vegas when you were a child.
Yeah. Look, I think that Las Vegas is one of the greatest cities in the world, and to grow up in this city was a privilege. It was a small town when I was growing up here. There were a total of 10 high schools. Now there's 42, I think. And what that meant was that if you played any one sport, the people that played that sport in the whole city, you knew every kid that did that. And so for me, I grew up playing tennis, and it was a small town, and just being from Vegas and, knowing all the tennis players in town, I was exposed to Andre Agassi, who became my best friend. And that's how I got into this business. So honestly, for me, growing up in Vegas was the best career break I could have ever asked for.
And your father was the owner of an NBC affiliate in Las Vegas, along with 6 other television stations in Nevada, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and Arizona. Did that play any part looking back on your future?
It did. My dad was the best negotiator I've ever been around. And I've been fortunate. I've been around a lot of them, and a lot of great ones. But he was the best because he had such clarity on where he wanted to go with each deal so far in advance. He was playing chess when everyone else was playing checkers. And that was a blessing for me to just be around that. You're exposed to it and you're dealing with it. I tell people this all the time. All day, all of us negotiate. We're all negotiators.
Good point.
And so when your dad is a great negotiator, you learn at a really young age how to think several steps ahead, because if you don't, you will be backed into a corner quick.
From that, as you learned as you were growing older, and before you went off to school at Georgetown, what were your early career goals at that time?
Well, I knew I wanted to go to law school, and I thought I would go get a law degree, and then I would go get an MBA, and then I wanted to get into marketing. So I happened to always like marketing because I like persuasion. I like thinking about how we're convinced of something and why we become convinced of something and what it means when we're convinced of something. The last part might be the most important. And so I always liked persuasion. And I just thought I would go do that on my own. I'd go work for a company and do that. So I did not know when I was going off to college and then even to law school that I would end up in sports. Even though I was really close to Andre, I did not know that would happen.
Okay, so then you go off to Georgetown. Was Georgetown always the law school for you that you wanted to go to? You were always kind of targeting Georgetown then?
Well, I did Georgetown for undergrad, and then I did the University of Arizona for law school. And Georgetown was my second choice going off to college. I wanted to go to Stanford first. I did not get into Stanford, but I loved Georgetown. I was really fortunate to go there. I'm very close to my college roommates to this day, very, very close. And I was just amazed. I got to Georgetown, And I quickly realized that the days of being able to bluff and lean into something and persuade by just acting like you knew were over, that they were done. And I needed to start to do real homework. I needed to start to do real research and try to understand what the facts of something actually were. So I was humbled very quickly, and I appreciated that. And I think I was humbled for all 4 years there. That's for sure. The students were just amazing.
How was it going from growing up in Las Vegas to traveling across country to the East Coast to attend Georgetown?
Yeah, I thought what was interesting is they were more interested and perplexed by someone from Vegas than I was by them. You know, like, you just think, yeah, you're from D.C. That's awesome. It's a great town. And, the world's government really is based out of here. And because we're the leader of the free world, and, oh, you're from New York and you're from Chicago. And they just kept thinking, so which hotel do you live in? And does your dad explain? Does he let people know he works for the mob? It's like, no, he doesn't. And is your mom, is she a cocktail waitress? They couldn't get their, literally for all 4 years, they couldn't get their head. Now, that's obviously changed now because Vegas is a much bigger city, and they know that we have professional sports, and, we have 2.3 million people here now. But when I went out there, it was strange for people.
I'll bet. So that brings up a good point. You go back to your childhood saying, you're a tennis player. Andre Agassi becomes your best friend. You really didn't think you were leading into the sports world. Where did that turn, Perry, that all of a sudden, did Andre reach out to you? Did you reach out to them? How did that connection happen?
Well, two things happened. The first thing was I got interested in the marketing side of things, and how it could apply to the people in my life, specifically Andre. When I was in college, he did an ad for Canon cameras where he said, image is everything. And, he's just reading 3 words on a script. And Andre is smart and kind and engaged, and he's very thoughtful about what he is doing. He puts a lot of thought into it. But at the same time, he was just a kid. He was a young guy. And so his agent is saying, well, we're going to say image is everything. He says those 3 words. And suddenly this guy that is smart and interesting and thoughtful is being perceived as this punk kid from Las Vegas who only cares about his image. And so I learned from that if you put any slogan on the air enough times, it will become part of your brand. And you better be careful about what you're articulating. So that was just in the friend role. I was like, oh my gosh, look, as a friend, I'm happy to look at these things with you going forward because, we kind of led with our chin here. This wasn't very fun. And then when I was in law school, the American Bar Association had a negotiation competition. And my friend Jeff Posen from law school and we won the West Coast region. And we were going out for the national finals. And at the same time that we were going out for the national finals, I was talking to Andre about IMG, his agency, and what he paid IMG. And I said, I'm fascinated by this industry because they don't have a conflict of interest requirement. And so what it means isn't that they work for you. Instead, Andre, you work for them. And he's like, well, how do you figure that? And I said, because they're going to go in and they're going to say, hey, Coca-Cola, we're IMG. You want to be in tennis? We want you to be in tennis. How about Pete Sampras? I don't know. Andre Agassi? Maybe. Jim Courier? Could be. John McEnroe? Oh, my kid loves John McEnroe. So you're a menu item. They're not out there pounding the table for you. They're pounding up the table for them because they're going to get the commission wherever it is. And I just found that so strange. And he said, well, and I said, well, what do you pay them? And he said, well, I pay them, this percent, and I pay it across the board, even on prize money. And I said, oh, geez, well, let's invert that. Imagine you were going to start your own company. What would it cost you to do that? Let's look at that, and let's look at how much profit there is in this for them. So we added up what it would cost if he were to do his own company. And we compared that to what they were being paid. And that difference was a few $100,000. And I said to Andre, really, you're paying them a profit to go find the next you.
Great point.
And that's the real problem with this structure, is that you're incentivizing them to burn through you.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, the problem I've got, Perry, is that they're my negotiators. But you won that thing. You're going out for that other thing. You go talk to them. So I had one suit. I had 2 ties. I had a retainer. Went out to, meaning an actual retainer in my mouth, not meaning a retainer from Andre, meaning I had a retainer.
Sure.
And I was a young kid, and I went out and sat down with Bob Kane, and we worked out a deal on what we would pay him on endorsements that were tennis-based, like your racket, your shoes, etc. Endorsements that were non-tennis based, I said, well, on those we're going to pay a lower percentage. And then on prize money, I said, look, at the end of the day, you get whatever percentage of prize money you want, as long as that's the percentage of points you're winning. Like, what do you mean? I said, I literally don't understand how you guys get away with charging for prize money. You provide no value and you take no risk. And if you don't have value or risk, you can't get compensated, because that's what all compensation is based on: value or risk. And I don't see it. You sign him up, okay, but when Andre loses the match, they don't write about IMG. They write about Andre.
Right about Andre.
He's taking all the risk. So I don't see it. And up till that point, every golfer and tennis player in the world paid a percentage of prize money. And as we sit here today, none do. Not one. And so I'm, pleased with that, because that changed the mold. They shouldn't charge for that.
No. And from 1993 to 2008, you become the president for 14 years of the Andre Agassi Enterprises, or 15 years, I'm sorry. What were some early roadblocks that happened along the way? And then when did it start to turn and become rewarding?
Well, it was always rewarding. When you're working with your childhood best friend, I just think that that's a blessing and a gift. I really did love it. And so it really was always rewarding. But one of the early roadblocks was, what happened was, when we got done with the IMG deal, Andre said, why don't you just run everything for me going forward? So then, while I was in law school, I worked full time for him, ran his business, and went to school full time. And in the fall of my 3rd year of law school, I had read an article where Phil Knight said that Andre's Canon campaign, where he said image is everything, is one of the most damaging things ever done to Nike, because you have a Nike athlete out there saying that image is more important than performance. And I knew we needed to get out of that. And so working that deal with Canon was one of the early roadblocks, and a very difficult one. I'm a kid, and I knew what their schedule was. I knew that we needed to shoot an ad in November, and that it needed to be available by the end of December of 93. And they sent me the agreement. I looked over the agreement, and it didn't give us approval rights. I called them up and said, well, I can't do this unless we have approval rights of the campaign. And they said, well, we're not going to give that to you. We've never given it to Andre. So, well, then we wish you all the best. Good luck. And I knew they didn't have time to find someone else. So they were a little bit pickled on that. And they called back. Well, what they did was they had this lawyer call me, and he read me the riot act, screaming up and down, saying he was going to make sure that I never took the bar exam anywhere in Nevada, anywhere in the United States. And I said to him, listen, you don't know my dad, do you? And he said, no, I don't know your dad. And I said, my dad is scary. You're not scary. And so don't worry about it. I'm not worried about you. Don't worry about me. This is our position. Unless we have a creative control, we're not doing it. And so they conceded a few days later, and we got rid of the Image is Everything campaign and changed to Express Yourself. And that was the campaign, I think, for probably the next 6 or 7 years after that, was Express Yourself. And that cleared the way then for us to go do the deal with Nike that we wanted to do, which was the biggest contract in Nike's, the biggest contract of Andre's career was his Nike agreement. It was the next one.
And that was worth about $10 million, correct?
That was worth a little over 100 million.
100 million. Wow.
That was one of the most fun negotiations I've ever had the pleasure of being a part of.
I'll bet. And how old are you at the time, Perry?
I was 25 when I started the Nike negotiation, and I was 26 when it ended.
And then did you help start the Andre Agassi Charitable Foundation then as well?
I did. I did that with Andre. That was a lot of fun. Like I said at the beginning, Andre is a very thoughtful person. And I don't just mean he's thoughtful toward others. I mean, he's thoughtful about things. He really wants to examine them. And, when we started the foundation, there were no current athletes that had ever done a foundation.
Really?
And so it completely broke the mold. Bob Kane at IMG called me, yelling at me and saying, this is the wrong call. And to Bob Kane's credit, we put him on the board, which I appreciated that he did. And years later, he said, we've got this young golfer coming up. And when Perry said that Andre wanted to do this and that he was going to help him do it, I was really mad. And I called Perry. I read him the riot act. But this has been the right call. This young golfer, we've already advised him to do a foundation. He wants to do a foundation, and his name is Tiger Woods. And so, it's kind of a cool thing to
really cool.
We want to do those things. And I give Andre, so much credit for that he was always willing, if he believed in the cause, he was always willing to take a chance.
Looking back, it's just weird because everybody has pretty much a charitable foundation these days.
Everybody.
So when you were saying at the time nobody did, it was like it's kind of shocking.
Well, that's what Bob was yelling at me about. He said, "You don't understand. You do that when they're retired." And I said, "Bob, when they're retired, they don't have any more leverage. The leverage is during their career. You're going to ruin his career." So we're not going to ruin his career. Well, Andre's a smart guy. He's going to be just fine. He'll perform perfectly well.
And then with Andre, I'm assuming that's how you get hooked up with Brook Shields.
That's right. And so I finished law school, and Andre called. He came to the graduation. I packed my car. I was about to drive back to Vegas from Tucson, Arizona. And he called and said, "Don't drive back yet. Fly to L.A." So I flew to L.A., and Brooke and Andre and I went to dinner. And she said, "Would you represent me?" And so I said, "Well, I don't really know a lot about the entertainment industry." And she said, "You'll learn that." And so I went to Norman Brokaw at William Morris, and I said, "We need an agency. We know that. I would be a manager," because it's different. In sports, you're called an agent. In entertainment, you're a manager.
Yeah.
And then there are in entertainment, you have a manager and an agent. In sports, you just have an agent. And so I was her manager, and we went to William Morris, and Norman Brokaw, the CEO, took me up to meet a guy named John Kimball and said, "Sit here and John will teach you the business." And for weeks, I just sat on John's couch, and he would get off the phone and was kind enough to say, "Oh, that was Tony Jonas. He runs Warner Brothers Television. This is what I was talking about. This is why it's relevant." And, a few years later, we were fortunate enough to get her in her own sitcom on NBC.
So that's kind of how you made the path into the film industry, so to speak. And then in 1996, you become the co-producer of Suddenly Susan, which was a TV series. Did it all come from that path then?
It did, because Brooke was very kind and patient with me and said, "I trust you, you'll learn it." I started in May of 94, and we had her on, if you recall, she was on the Friends after the Super Bowl in 96. And that episode exploded, just ratings wise. And every studio in town wanted her, every network wanted her. And so we were pretty quickly able to do a deal with Tony Jonas at Warner Brothers and get her on NBC. And so by the fall of 96, she has her own show, and I'm the co-producer of it because I had found the script, sent it to her, she liked it, and then we worked it with folks at Warner Brothers to the place where it got on the air.
So during all this time, did you get to take the bar?
I took the bar exam.
Okay.
In July of 94.
Okay. So that was passed. You got through all that. And now we're focusing, the career is changing, and we're pretty much on a train with no brakes going forward, so to speak. And then in 2001, you start handling all of Shaq's business. How did you meet up with Shaq, and how did that relationship develop?
Yeah, so we're a weird little company. We don't recruit at all. So if we represent you, you called us.
Okay.
And in 2001, I was at the U.S. Open with Andre, and I got a phone call out of nowhere. And it was Shaquille and his money manager, Lester Nispel, and his uncle, Mike Paris, and a lawyer named Dennis Roach. And they said, hey, everything's fine with our agent. We just want to know what you think of how Shaquille's managed, the marketing that you see. And I was really, really candid. I don't really have a different gear than that. And because I feel like it's not kind. You can be honest and kind at the same time. I don't think it's kind to lie to people. And so I said, well, I don't really follow your career that closely, but I can't think of an athlete that's got worse marketing than you.
How'd they handle that?
It was quiet. And I said, the last ad I saw you in, I don't follow your stuff. So, but the last ad I saw you in, you were in a tutu on a dance floor. And he goes, oh yeah, that's funny. So, well, there's a place for humor in marketing, Shaquille, but there's a point where it looks like you're thumbing your nose at people. And I think it looks like you're thumbing your nose at people. I said, humor needs to still be relatable. And if it's not relatable, it doesn't work. So, that's how you need to look at this stuff. You've just won 2 championships in a row. You've won back-to-back championships. Let me ask you a question. Did you work hard? He goes, yeah. I said, is it hard to do it? He said, yeah. I said, congratulations. You have something in common with around 300 million Americans. You work hard. We're all working hard. And when have you ever told people that you understand that you understand that journey? You can do it with humor, but you got to show people that you know what hard work is, because you have worked hard. I said, look, people think that you're successful because you're 7'1". And here's the truth. There's a lot of 7'1" guys, but there's only one you. So you're doing something different. I don't know what it is, but you're doing something different, because your 7'1" is different than everybody else's. And that matters. And you need to talk about that. And I said, look, there's an objective way to tell whether what I'm saying is correct or not, which is how many deals have you had renewed? Because when a deal is renewed, anybody can try to sucker someone. That's not making a business. That's making a deal. But if you want to grow a business, you've got to work with people. You've got to understand what they need and how you can do something that meets their goals. If you can do that, now you've got a business. So how many deals have you had renewed? So it's quiet. And he finally said, 0. Oh, come on. You never had a deal renewed? At this point, he'd been in the league for 9 years, from 92 to 01. He goes, no. I said, Reebok? He goes, nope. I said, you were with Pepsi, right? He goes, yeah. I said, that deal wasn't renewed? He goes, nope. Wow. I said, okay. And that was that. We got off the phone. Andre came downstairs, got off the phone, and I said I had to go. And that's it. Again, they're all in Los Angeles. All 4 people on the phone are in LA. The very next night, Andre and Steph and Gil and Darren and Todd Wilson and I are at Il Molino. And at Il Molino in New York, they pack them in. They really pack them in. And there's a guy that's right next to us, and he's looking over at our table. And generally, people look the other way. They look toward Andre and Steph. And by generally, I mean 100% of the time. And here, this guy's looking my way. And I'm like, that's weird. And I said, can I help you? And he said, are you Perry Rogers? I said, I am. He said, I'm Dennis Roach. I'm the man that was on the phone yesterday. The odds of this are 0. Okay,
0.
New York has thousands of restaurants. And even if you put them in the same restaurant, to put them at the table next to us,
right.
It's 0. And I said, oh gosh, what are you doing here? I thought you were in LA. He said, I was, but my daughter goes to the University of Pennsylvania. And I'm here with my wife and my other daughter. And this is my daughter's favorite restaurant in the country. So we fly into New York, we eat here, and then we take the train down to Penn tomorrow. And I said, oh my gosh, what's small world? I said, listen, man, I said a lot of things on the phone yesterday. I hope I didn't offend anyone. He goes, oh, no, you didn't offend us at all. We'll be following up with you. I said, yeah, whenever you want advice, you can always follow up. He goes, no, it's more than that. You'll see. So we came home the next day, and about 5 days later, November 11th happened. I'm sorry, September 11th
September
happened,
11th.
and the world shut down. And about 4 weeks after that, Shaquille called me and asked if I'd come see him in LA. I went down and talked to him, and at the end of the conversation, he said, "I'd like to hire you." And I said, "You got to call Andre. Here's his number and ask him." He goes, "Well, I thought it's your company." I said, "It is, but it's going to impact my childhood best friend. So give him a ring and see what he says." And at the time, Andre and I were next door neighbors. And so when I came home, Andre was literally in my kitchen. He goes, "He's going to hire you." I said, "Well, what do you think about that?" He says, "I think it's great." And that was that.
It's funny how you hear some of the stories and how some things happen. And then in 2002, you become president of Prism, which was the premier integrated sports management. Was that the company that was formed from the Alliance Sports Management Company? Then it just kind of flowed from one?
So that was, we created a separate company to represent Shaquille. And then ultimately we put Adam Scott in there and George Lopez. And so we did everything but Andre through Alliance, which then became Prism, which then ultimately became PRP.
Okay. Gotcha.
So it's all the same company, as far as what it does.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And then in 2005, you were part of an investment group that bought and then sold the Golden Nugget.
Yeah.
And you guys turned a profit of 226% in less than 2 years. And this was all before the age of 36, 37 years old. Walk me through that process, Perry, of how did you become part of the investment group? And then how did you guys get involved with the Nugget and be able to flip it so fast?
Yeah. So I'll try to give you the quick version.
Sure.
But again, it goes back to Vegas being the greatest city you could ever grow up in. My first day at Gorman, the kid in front of me says, his name is Poster and I'm Rogers. And he says, "You got $25. I said, "What?" He goes, "You have $25. He said, "The Showboat Hotel has a contest. It's $50. And if you pick the most number of wins in the NFL all season long, you win a house. I got $25. Do you have $25? And so Tim Poster became my friend that day. He became my business partner, really. Gave him $25. We were terrible. We lost. We did not win the house. We didn't even win a goldfish you could put in the house. And so years later, we just stayed close. He had built a company called Travelscape, which he sold to Expedia for north of $100 million. Tim and I were going to lunch after he'd sold Expedia. And I said, after he sold to Expedia, I said, "Tim, we should buy a casino. You were meant for this business." And he goes, "What are you thinking?" He's a very charismatic person. I said, "Well, why don't we buy the Golden Nugget?" And so we started to talk to the MGM. We talked to Jim Murray, who was a longtime friend. And we ended up buying the Golden Nugget. And, it just, again, there's nothing better than being blessed, because being lucky is better than being good. So let me tell you what happened. When we bought the Golden Nugget, the place had EBITDA of around $32 million. And Tim made all these changes, which is we changed our craps odds. We redid our sports book. We doubled down on what our slot play could be. He really focused on the casino. And we were geniuses, Tommy. We took the EBITDA from $32 million all the way up to $32 million. Nothing changed. We did all this stuff, and we were so hoping that we had done this. But Tillman Fertitta wanted to own a casino. And so he came in and he said, "Okay, you guys have 50 million of equity in the place, and we had 165 million of debt." He said, "So the debt, the 165, I'll take. On the 50, I'll give you 90 million. Oh, no, we're childhood friends building a casino company. It was me, Andre, Tim, and Tom. Tim and Tom owned 75% together.
Okay.
Andre and I owned 15%, and Chuck Mathewson owned 10%. Chuck is just one of the all-time great people. And so we said, we're going to build this casino company. We're childhood friends. Well, I'll give you 110 million. No, we're childhood friends. I don't know. What part aren't you hearing? 130. Okay, you're just being offensive because you're not listening to us. 150. No, man, there's not a price. 163. Where do we sign? And we were done. We were out of the casino business.
The short.
a number that we honestly couldn't refuse. And so it was a lot of fun. I miss owning the Golden Nugget because Tim Poster, I think, is one of the greatest people gaming will ever see. I really believe that. He is so smart, and his personality, he's just so he's just someone that connects to people very easily. He's easy to believe in, and I feel blessed to have been in business with him.
Speaking of being blessed, in 2006, you're named one of the top 40 under 40 in the Sports Business Journal, which was initiated in 1999, that identifies and honors the most promising young executives in the sports business under the age of 40. And then in 2008, it continues to get better for you, Perry, and you're profiled as one of Las Vegas's new titans by the New York Times. With all this going, did it ever happen to you or somebody pull you aside and say, hey, man, ego's getting out of control, or, you're starting to go down a different path that you shouldn't be going, and somebody ground you, or did you stay grounded the whole time?
I did not stay grounded. I try to tell people this now, which is that, you can choose humility or God will choose it for you.
Great point.
And unfortunately, I chose B. We'd had a lot of success at a really young age. Andre and I bought and sold. Well, we started a bank called Nevada First Bank. We sold that, made a lot of money on that. We were the original investors in Pure, the nightclub. We made a lot of money on that. We'd been fortunate. Things had fallen our way. And you become convinced it's you, and it's not you. I mean, there's no part of it that's you. You're blessed. Things have fallen your way. My dad had a lot of flaws. But one of the things he was great at was he always recognized that the blessing that any of us have who are born in this country is that we have an asset that we played no role in creating. I didn't get to choose to be born in the U.S. I just was. And I think that keeping that in mind can start your humility. I didn't do that. And then I think for me, anyways, and look, everyone's journey is different, but for me, I lost my relationship with God. And I believe that when you aren't connected to something higher than yourself, I think you're at risk. And I was at in grave risk. And I think that played its way out.
Eventually ground you back down, gets you refocused, probably puts you on probably more focused than you were beforehand when that all happens. And then in 2008, you turn Prism into PRP, which it is today, a sports management and consulting company. Like I said at the top of the show, features NBA Hall of Famer Shaq, Kyrie Irving, Jason Tatum. Perry, what's some of the challenges? And you mentioned this earlier that, you're a company that doesn't go out and look for them. They're calling you. So what's the challenges of that, of getting the next athlete or the next person to, hey, I want to be part of Perry's group?
Yeah. I honestly couldn't tell you because it's not how I function. So I don't think about it. It might mean that I'm the worst businessman in the country. And I accept that. I know that there are a lot of people that would go out there and go bust like crazy for that next client. But, I came into this thinking I want to make sure that when Andre is 50 and 60 and 70 years old, he feels like he has purpose. And I'm still driven toward that. So Shaquille has not been in the NBA for 9 years, and he hasn't been a force in the NBA for 11, right? 12 maybe.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. And, he's hotter than ever. And I like that. Every single element of Shaquille's life, I feel responsible for. And I like that he has such purpose. And what that means is I'm hyper-focused on that. I'm not thinking about, okay, what's that next client look like? We were fortunate. Kyrie Irving called us. His agent, Jeff Wetzler, called us and said, I think I'm going to get the number one player in the draft. I don't do marketing as well as you guys do, meaning Colin Smeaton and myself, we are business partners. And I would like to have you guys do the marketing and I'll do the player agreement. So we started with Kyrie. I think we were really fortunate. Things fell our way. Uncle Drew was one of the most fun things ever. Uncle Drew came out of a relationship. And again, that's kind of my advice to anyone would be, stay humble and spend time caring about people, actual real time caring about people. When Uncle Drew happened, the way it occurred was I got a call from a guy at an agency, and he said, "Tell me that you or Colin represent an NFL player." No, I don't. Why? Because Pepsi has the Super Bowl, and I need to have an athlete so that I can we can do an ad, and we love working with you and Colin. And I said, no, but you need Kyrie Irving. He goes, "No, Perry, I don't have time for this. I've got to get off the phone. I got to get an NFL player." And I kept him on the phone for 30 minutes. And we ended up doing this little regional deal in Cleveland with Pepsi. And Kyrie is just dripping with personality. And so when they shot the spot for this little local deal, Mark Gilbar, who's a director, and Kyrie sat around talking, and they came up with this idea of Uncle Drew. And we went to a larger deal with Pepsi, filmed Uncle Drew, and to this day, it's the single most watched basketball video on the internet.
I can believe that. I don't know how many times I've seen it.
Right? And they're all great. And it's all out of a guy calling saying, "Tell me you represent an NFL player."
Perry, how did you get involved with the 30 for 30 of, this magic moment with the Shaq and Penny relationship?
Yeah, we're fortunate. Colin and I have a great relationship with Connor Shell at ESPN. And Connor runs the 30 for 30 programs, and we've talked to him about a few different 30 for 30s. And the first one we talked to him about was this magic moment, which was Shaquille and Penny. It was a great time. And that team could have been much more. Mm-hmm. It was a time to reflect back. And Shaquille's great about that. He's willing to have good, honest conversations about the missed opportunities. And that one, what happened in Orlando it led to LA, but it was still a missed opportunity in Orlando.
In the business you're in, how prevalent is lawsuits part of it? Is it just another part of the business and they just come and go, or are they not as frequent, as often as one might think? They're rare. They happen, but they're very rare. Okay.
Which is the way you want them. Because again, most of this stuff should just be relationships, just people saying, hey, this is what we've talked about. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And I think that what we do well, as I said earlier, when we started with Shaquille, he had never had a deal renewed. With Icy Hot, which was the first large deal I did for Shaquille, we did that in 2002. We just did our 7th extension, which takes us through the year 2022. So we will have knocked down 21 years when that deal expires, and it won't expire. We'll just keep going. And so the reason for that is because in our office, we call our partners every few weeks and say, "How can we help your business?" And what they feel is we're understood. We're heard. We have a deal with a company right now on Shaquille. We're 14 months into it, and it's a 3-year deal. And they called us a month ago and said, "We want to extend." They have another, we're still at 1 year and 10 months away from the expiration of that deal. And they already want to extend. But it's because Shaquille is that great to work with. And we all work that hard, including Shaquille, beginning with Shaquille, to make sure that we're meeting people's needs. So if you're doing those things, you don't have a lot of lawsuits.
And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to start this show. It was to find the background of how these things that everybody sees and hears and how it happens. And there's a break, and there's timing, and there's things that just you can't explain. They just happen at the right time. For you, it was getting the phone call at the U.S. Open and not expecting it to be anybody associated with Shaquille O'Neal. And that has turned into all the stuff you have just brought up, and there's no end in sight for it. As you can tell, it's going to continue to roll. People are continuing to extend. And as you brought up earlier, he had 0, companies, renewing him. And now he's got stuff for the foreseeable future, as long as he pretty much wants it. And I want to kind of go forward with that a little bit, Perry. And you're a partner in JRS Hospitality.
Yeah. And
co-own several brands of restaurants and bars around the company. And some of them, here in town with Beer Park and Hex and Chateau Nightclub in Paris. But the one I want to kind of bring up too is Big Chicken, because you're an investor and co-owner with that one. Your idea, somebody else's? How did that collaborate?
Well, they're all collaborations. I've got great partners in the restaurant company, but Shaquille was the driving force on that. Shaquille was there were two things that were happening at the same time. Shaquille says on Turner, when he sees a player that he thinks is weak, he says, "Oh ho, barbecue chicken." Always. Uh-oh. And I'm like, why do you say that? He said, because it's like eating barbecue chicken, Perry. When I was going up against a weak guy, because I would tell the guy, "You are barbecue chicken tonight." And I've got these great partners in Corey Jenkins and Colin Smeaton and Matt Silverman that really help kind of push the restaurant business forward and Shaquille's business forward. And so you have these two things happening at the same time: a client who is interested in the business and this restaurant business that wants to grow. And so I said to Shaquille, we should just do something around chicken. And we were FaceTiming, and he took his hand, and for those of you that can't see me, put his hand here, and then he did a thumbs up. And I said, and I think we should call it Big Chicken. And thumbs up. And I said, I think we should do a show about the development of the restaurant. And he gave me, once again, a thumbs up. And so we sold a show to Facebook Watch, and we were off and running. But, again, the genius of that, Big Chicken, because it is a great product. It really is. And I can say that because, I can barely make a hot dog in the microwave. It's a great product because Matt Silverman and Matt Pye are two great chefs, and they worked with Shaquille for 6 months, did 54 recipes just to get the breading.
Wow.
That's just one item. I mean, they worked so hard to build a great product, and they really did do it. And the reviews show it. So that's been a real blessing. Big Chicken's been a lot of fun because you're combining. I mean, I was fortunate when Andre and I were working together. I was fortunate enough to help Michael Mina at the beginning of his company. And Michael taught me a lot about the restaurant business. And those learnings, along with Matt Silverman and Corey Jenkins, have been applied to JRS. And out of JRS came Big Chicken.
Perry, last question for you before I let you go. Advice to a young entrepreneur out there, possibly looking to get into the same field that you're doing.
Well, what I would say, and I tell my kids this every day, nothing beats hard work. And you can tell that during this conversation, I've gotten really lucky. But I've worked hard the entire time, and I've been fortunate enough to get lucky, but it's not been that I've been sitting in my house waiting for someone to just give me a call. I have been out there working hard. And so I would tell them, I'd say a few things. I wouldn't just give you one piece of advice. Don't let anybody outwork you, because work is a choice. There are no shortcuts. They are all long cuts. Anytime you think you're cutting a corner, I promise you it will be a longer journey for you. And I hope that you would use the mistakes that I made of trying to get to a deal too quick when I was young, of being too brash when I was young, of not spending enough time with people when I was young. And you wouldn't repeat that. And you would slow down, connect with people, listen to them, and try to work out business deals that work for everybody and not just yourself.
That is fantastic advice coming from somebody who can tell it to you firsthand. People, before we wrap up the show, podcasting isn't hard, although we talked about hard work. When you have the right partners, the team at Buzzsprout is passionate about helping you succeed. Join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. Following the link in the show notes lets Buzzsprout know we sent you, and you'll get a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan, and it helps support the show. Perry Rogers, thank you so much for your time. It's valuable to me, as you are a very busy person, and taking time to be on my show. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tommy. I appreciate it.
Everybody else, make sure that you go and subscribe to Before the Lights podcast. It's available on any of the platforms you can get podcast. For show notes, go to the website, follow us on Instagram. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale, and we'll talk to you next time.